Welcome to Illuminating Catholics, podcast of the Diocese of Sioux City. I'm Dawn Prosser, Director of Communications for the Diocese. Together with Carmen Bauer of the Faith Formation Office, we will shed light upon topics of faith in the modern church. Our guests include Catholic clergy, religious sisters, and other experts in their fields to help us understand what's happening in the church today. We will explore issues, even the tough ones, and find answers to common questions about Catholicism. Thank you for joining us for today's Illuminating Catholics, shedding light to understand the modern church.
Welcome back to the Illuminating Catholics podcast. I am Carmen Bauer, the Director of Faith Formation for the Diocese of Sioux City.
And I'm Dawn Prosser. I'm Director of Communications for the Diocese.
Thank you for listening to us today on your podcast app, the Lumen Media website, or our YouTube channel. Today we have Dustin Heino of Catholic Mutual Group, our Diocesan Claims and Risk Manager. Security and safety in houses of worship are being talked about more and more as a result of shocking headlines in recent years. Among efforts made for the safety of parishioners in the Diocese of Sioux City include initiatives through Catholic Mutual, which Dustin will share with us. So welcome, Dustin.
Well, thank you so much for having me on this morning. I appreciate it.
It's nice to have you with us, and we don't get to see you a lot, so it's nice to. We're Zooming today, so it's good.
There's a lot of windshield time in my life.
Yeah. But you supply us with a lot of photos, and we appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So we've actually had a lot of communication with Catholic Mutual as safety has kind of come to the forefront, and we've been preparing emergency plans and doing things like threat matrices, and it's something you just don't think that churches have to worry about, but it's great to have you here, opportunity for you to talk about it. But first, why don't you just kind of share your role and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally a Carroll, Iowa, born and raised boy, son of a 38-year veteran of the Carroll Police Department, in fact. So had a long-standing relationship with law enforcement and a love for it. So
back the blue.
My wife Stacy and I, we are raising two extremely active boys, from baseball to music and all points in between. Here in Glenwood, Iowa is where we live. We enjoy all sorts of stuff, from cruise vacations to getting outdoors, family game nights, and managed to squeeze in some time volunteering with our church here as well, both on the music team as well as in the children's ministry. So it's been super rewarding for us, and just glad that we get to do that. I've been fortunate to be with Catholic Mutual for a little over 11 years now, and in my current role with the Diocese of Sioux City for the last 3.5. The early part of my career saw me in the claims department at Catholic Mutual exclusively, helping our members navigate really catastrophic events quite often. Unfortunately, that ranges everything from hurricanes to widespread freeze damage events, and of course, the wind, hail, and floods of the Midwest that we're a little too familiar with these days. Certainly, we're ramping up the spring storm season, so it's gotten me good and active. But these last 3.5 years I got to spend in the diocese so far have really been my favorite of my career. Getting to serve in my hometown diocese and getting to drop in on Dad every once in a while and see how he's doing in Carroll in the midst of my duties has been a real pleasure for me, and really getting to establish face-to-face relationships with the parish and school leadership out at each of these locations. It's been a great experience for me, and again, super rewarding.
And we're so glad to have you with us and taking care of us and our properties and so forth. So it's safe to assume that if you don't work for a Catholic entity, you may not really understand Catholic Mutual, what their role is with the diocese. Do you want to just kind of give a little elevator speech overview for the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely a little niche. Catholic Mutual is on purpose a company that caters exclusively to the Catholic diocese and entities throughout the United States and Canada. In fact, we serve roughly 2/3 of the diocese and archdiocese across the United States and Canada, and also provide our risk management and claim services to some of the separate entities out there as well. So no one understands managing the needs of diocese from an insurance perspective quite like Catholic Mutual, so it's critical for our team to provide those customized coverage and risk solutions that can be customized to those needs of our members. So About half of our members elect to retain the services of a claims and risk manager. That's my title. And that is a person embedded within the diocese that is dedicated to providing the risk management claim services that diocese needs day in, day out. So I take a lot of pride in making sure that our parishes and schools operate as safely as possible, and to ensure that they can trust that when things go sideways, as they can oftentimes do here in the Midwest, that they know I'll be here for them. No one wants to deal with a claim. It can be very difficult waters to navigate if you're not used to it on the daily. So unfortunately, over the last 11 years at Catholic Mutual, I've gotten used to dealing with it on the daily.
Wow.
But I just want our folks within the diocese to know that if weather turns severe, God forbid if a fire should happen at their location, or otherwise some claim event happens, that there's someone in their corner that knows their diocese like no other.
Yeah, you offer such a great support to not only the parishes, but to us here at the Chancery. I know we're always bugging you with questions here and there, and you're always so gracious and so helpful and happy to help. So we really appreciate you on our end of things.
No, that's my pleasure entirely. It's a great crew to work with.
Well, kind of transitioning into today's topic for this podcast is, we live in a culture where we often will see violence and have these big tragedies occurring, and they've been hitting closer to home with houses of worship being targeted, and then recently up at Ascension Catholic School in Minneapolis, which I know was very close to home. It hit us all hard up here. So as we kind of see this happening around us, have you seen an increase in conversations about safety and security at your office at Catholic Mutual?
Yeah, we definitely have. I mean, really as a whole, over the last several years, Catholic Mutual's been kind of pushing forward and trying to develop these improved safety and security plans and guidance for our schools, and certainly for our churches as well. There's no denying that when tragedy strikes like this and it shows up in the headlines and it shows up on our television screens, that it really does prompt action. It's a shame sometimes that that's what it takes to prompt us, but when that moment strikes, we want our membership to know how to respond. So as part of that renewed focus, we've been fielding, really a pretty marked increase in inquiries from our membership to see what we can do to help. As the son of a police officer, I'm grateful to see that increase. I'd rather have the questions asked than not, so that we can make sure that our response is appropriate for the situation. You hope and pray that tragedy never lands on our doorstep, but we really have a moral and legal obligation to be ready. So that's what Catholic Mutual's really been trying to drive home these last few months.
And that preparation can be so key in those moments when people know exactly what to do and what they can do. So last summer, there was a memo that went out to our parish and schools noting that you and Catholic Mutual had guidance documents for our locations. So can you give us a little bit of a sense of what types of resources are available to our sites, to our parishes and our schools?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the biggest thing is me, to some extent. Because I'm there, I'm embedded in the diocese, I've been out to these locations, I kind of know them backwards and forwards almost as well as the people do there, but not quite. I want to make sure that those folks have my cell phone and they know they can reach me to discuss any topics or any questions they might have. Much of the resource that Catholic Mutual offers addresses things on a much broader basis. But again, I've gotten a pretty good feel to be able to mold my advice and guidance to the specific needs of that location. So with that said, the resources that we offer have really been carefully developed and updated over the last several years. We've got a host of our Catholic Mutual Cares PDF documents on best practices for topics like operations and property management, youth ministry, security. But additionally, our office produces quarterly newsletters for our locations that really try to emphasize sometimes seasonal safety tips and topics, but also emerging topics that we might see as headlines kind of dictate. Jackie Baring at the Chancery office puts that newsletter together for us each quarter and does a really fantastic job doing it. So first, I want to give a little hat tip to her. She's awesome. I'm the first to admit, though, written material doesn't exactly get people engaged or excited about it. So we're also fortunate that Catholic Mutual has put a lot of time, effort, and resource into developing some really high-quality video content as well. All those resources are out there at cmgconnect.org. cmgconnect.org, and it's available to our entire membership. And so there's resources on everything from critical incident response to AED familiarization, making sure that people know how to operate the defibrillators that we're seeing more and more frequently within our diocesan properties. Safe driving is a big emphasis for us as well, and making sure that approved drivers are the ones behind the wheel when they're driving on diocesan or parish business.
That's a lot. And I actually did go back to that memo and all the resources that were sent out at the end of August. And there is a lot. And we'll put a link in the show notes to that cmgconnect.org so that the listeners, if they want to pull up those documents and able to look them over, so that's available to everybody. So, and again, do take a look. There's a lot there. There might be something on your mind, and lo and behold, there's a well-prepared document that you can take a look at, and as well as the videos. And one of the things that, again, when this was sent out last summer, that really encouraging parishes to develop a safety committee and a safety plan, safety and security, and we offered you up as a resource to work with some of those parishes. So with that being said, that this was the recommendation, and hey, if this is your parish, you haven't done it yet, we'll talk about that in a minute. So what is the function of those committees? How would you define that?
In all likelihood, the probability of an active shooter at one of our parishes is statistically remote. So much of our focus has been on addressing that possibility of an active shooter, just because it's been in the headlines and it's been front of mind for us. But these safety and security committees are really meant to be in place to develop a comprehensive plan that's going to cover a host of emergency scenarios. We're asking those committees to be ready to plan out and address needs for storm sheltering, medical emergencies in our parishes, active shooters, really a whole host of potential scenarios. So we've typically recommended that our parishes tap into parishioners in the medical or EMS, law enforcement, fire departments. There's almost invariably someone in our parishes that fit one of those or more of those descriptions. So alongside the parish's pastor, business manager, any of the facilities management staff that we have there, we really want those groups to get together and start working to share their viewpoints and backgrounds to ensure that a diverse group is assessing the parish's specific safety and security needs.
I'm glad you mentioned the facilities manager. They're the ones that know like where the electrical boxes are and the fire alarm system, the Knox boxes, and all that kind of stuff.
The water shut off.
Yeah, because I could not tell you where any of that is in either this building where I work or at the church that I attend. So yeah, it's so interesting because you do look around your parish. Doesn't matter if you're in a larger city or a smaller town, that there are those resources available, and I would assume that they're very willing to serve just for the sake of the safety of the people and the property.
Definitely.
How have you been able to help some parishes pull that together and be that resource to get them going?
Yeah, so really the first tool that we tried to distribute out to the parishes just to kind of get their brain juices flowing was this parish safety and security guide that Catholic Mutual developed. It's a comprehensive, intimidating 72-page document that we developed over the last few years, and it really serves to be kind of a foundational guide for our parish's initial efforts in identifying those prospective team members and what their background should be, developing their plans and implementing and editing those plans as they need to. But a 72-page document's kind of intimidating, so I want to make sure that the locations know that they can reach out to me for additional guidance and questions or concerns they have along the way. Additionally, several of the committees have invited me to sit in on their meetings and provide some feedback and guidance, whether that's a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting or in person. I've been able to attend it both ways, which has been really beneficial to be able to provide my own feedback and guidance as they're working on implementing those plans. There's a lot of topics I'm pretty passionate about, and this is basically right at the top of the list for me. So I always appreciate those invites from any of our parish locations and school locations to discuss the needs that they've got and start working on a plan to address those needs.
That's great that they're using you as a resource. And as you're talking, it kind of reminded me back in the day when we left the churches open 24/7 so people could get in and pray if they want to. And sadly that practice has had to go away just because of the realities of our world today. So
it's the big tightrope that we walk at Catholic Mutual, is making sure that we're ensuring a safe and secure environment for our parishioners, but also being mindful of the mission of the church. And that's kind of the nice thing about working for a company with that faith-based mindset being first, is making sure that we're able to provide that very focused response to those needs.
So as you've been working with parishes and working with these committees, do you want to share some of the success stories, some of the good work you've seen thus far?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really impressed getting to work with several of those parishes, their safety and security committees. They've been working really diligently to develop, test out, and drill those plans. I think the most intimidating thing really is just that getting started phase. It feels overwhelming because you don't know where to start. So it's been great to see some of these committees that really have held their first meetings and just go walk the grounds of the parish. That's always the first step that we like to see for these committees. Once they get together and identify who the members should be, go ahead and go walk the interior and exterior of the buildings. Identify the places that should be your shelter-in-place locations. Plan out those emergency egress routes and make sure the pathways are clear. Make sure that those doors are operational. Every once in a while, I'll hit an exit door and it's a little stiff when I'm on my inspections, and so I'll write that up so that they know, hey, let's get that addressed and make sure in an emergency that door needs to be ready to be open. So identifying those, verifying their lighting is operational and at appropriate hours, and identifying any tools that they might need. Everything from high visibility vests for those that are working out in the parking lot that day, to walkie-talkies to make sure the exterior and interior teams are talking to one another. And then they just start to write out that plan. So we've seen a lot of our locations start working on that. So that's the first step, is walking the grounds. Step two, really, I like to recommend that they work with local law enforcement and first responders to coordinate and revise that plan with them. Again, the benefit of having some of those members of the local law enforcement and first responders teams on the team already is they know who to talk to. They know who the chief is, or they are the chief, and are able to coordinate those responses. So to me, those agencies are typically all too happy to review your plan, provide some feedback for you, and make sure that the parties understand what the plans and responses of each other are in the event of one of those emergencies. So step three really is looking at conducting some soft launch drills for these scenarios. The plan is only on paper. It doesn't know how to survive what difficulties you might encounter in the middle of an event. So we try to emphasize the importance of drilling those scenarios and not doing it on a Sunday mass in the middle of mass. We don't want to see that, obviously, but we do want to see these teams work with a small number of volunteers to kind of simulate what an emergency response might look like. And then step four is really implementing those changes that need to be made to accommodate those plans. After the drill, and you kind of have a post-drill discussion and identify what our weak points were, where our strengths were, and how we can build on that for the next time. So seeing a few of these locations within the diocese already at or past step four has been fantastic. I can think of Modern Day here in Sioux City. They updated the security features of their crash bars, those push to open door bars that you see at most commercial buildings anymore. They did a good job of being able to update those so they can really quickly pull a pin, and that is then locked from the inside. There is no way for someone on the outside to gain access at that point through those doors. So that was an important safety and security update that they made that came as a result of one of these walks, identifying what our ushers need to be able to safely and quickly secure the building in the event that an outside intruder is trying to make it in. I can think of Holy Name and St. Mary's and Marcus and Remsen. They've really clearly communicated to their parishioners what their team had planned through the church bulletin over the course of several weeks, to make sure that their parishioners were well aware of what that team was, who that team was comprised of, so they can bring their questions and concerns to that same group and try to identify from the public what some of those weak points are that maybe a different set of eyes have identified than even our own safety and security committee teams. So clear communication and planning is the biggest piece of this, and to see Marcus and Remsen really work diligently to communicate that out to the parishioners and guests there at those two churches has been great to see too. So really more than a few, I can't even name how many there are, have been working to implement an exterior security team. That's one of those pieces of low-hanging fruit that we've tried to emphasize here over the last several months, just to have someone outside before Mass to identify any potential violent intruders before they gain access to the building. Stop the threat or identify the threat, I should say, before it enters, and make that call to 911 and emergency responders, and get them headed towards the location, and get that exterior person then speaking with those inside the building. And of course, the nice thing about having them outside is that they're there to greet parishioners and guests and get them pointed in the right direction on a day-to-day normal operation business too.
So kind of like if you see something, say something.
Yeah, you know it. Absolutely.
Yep. And you don't have to be in New York City to see something and say something. You could be in Marcus Remsen, any of our locations. So I'm glad you brought that up. So
and as you mentioned those locations, I was just going to pop in and say that I've noticed that these conversations are happening at our local parishes, because as we've gone out and done our faith formation visits where we visit our DREs and our pastors, it's coming up more and more, as definitely in comparison to previous years. There are some faith formation programs who now have assigned volunteers on Wednesday nights to stand by the doors. They have a plan for locking doors and opening them, and who's allowed in the building those nights. And that's been really, really nice to see as well.
Impressive.
I love to see that. I love to hear that. Sometimes you put something out there as a broadcast to folks, and you wonder and worry, is it getting heard and is it being acted upon? And so to hear that is really encouraging, and I can only say, keep it up. That's awesome.
It just kind of comes to mind that a lot of this, what you're talking about, both of you, these things don't cost money, and we know parish budgets are like super tight. But yeah, having a volunteer standing at the door and out in the parking lot identifying, that doesn't cost the parish anything. So that's wonderful. So let's say you're in a parish and you're not aware that there's a committee, because it sounds like communicating that out is part of the steps, communicating that out to your community. So I'm in a parish, I don't have a committee, and maybe I'm interested in serving and protecting our community. So what's the first step for me?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. So for those locations that haven't yet formed a committee, to me, there's no time like the present. Let's get after it. So visit with your parish leadership to discuss what you've learned from listening to us today, and see what you might be able to do to serve on that committee or as part of the team that brings that plan to life come Mass times and large parish gatherings. We emphasize Mass and the normal school day sometimes, but oftentimes we forget about some of these large parish events that we host as well. So we want to make sure that we're cognizant of, does our plan need to change when big events are happening at the parish as well? How can we interact with and get local law enforcement involved to have a presence there when we've got a larger than normal number of visitors at the church? If Bishop shows up on a Sunday, we want to make sure that our response is maybe a little bit different than it would normally otherwise be. So having those people in our community reach out to the leadership at the parish level, your pastor and your business managers, and start working with them to identify those folks that can serve in that capacity. That's step one, and it's intimidating, but it's the right first step to take.
And like you said, it's once you get started and going with it, that's the hardest part, kind of like writing that term paper, or something
sure.
along those lines.
The first paragraph's always the hardest. Yeah.
Yes, I live that every day. Get that first paragraph out. So even if you're not interested in being on a committee, or maybe your parish does have one, so what are a few things the average parishioner can do to be of help for the security and safety of their own community?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is, and I mentioned it a little bit and touched on it a little bit earlier, collectively as the church, we really have a moral, ethical and ultimately a legal responsibility to be concerned about to ensure the safety and security of those facilities and the folks that come to them. So we really all need to play a role in protecting those parishes and schools. We've all heard it before, and you said it moments ago, Dawn, it bears repeating. If you see something, say something. If you're walking into church on Sunday and you see something amiss in the parking lot, it can be a suspicious person, like we were talking about before, or it can be a hole in the parking lot that you stumbled in. Let staff know. Let's see what we can do to prevent an incident before it happens. So be the eyes and ears of your parish and be a part of the response. Don't just passively observe and not mention it. You know, such a big part of my focus has just been on raising awareness, encouraging people to kind of instill in themselves that observational mindset. The next time you're out to dinner with a friend who happens to be a police officer, see where they sit at the restaurant. Almost without fail, you'll see that they orient themselves toward that main entrance or exit of the building because they want to have their vigilant eyes kind of trained on that door so they can scan for threats. For most of them, I know for my dad, it's involuntary. They don't really have a conscious thought of doing that. It's just, that's what they do. It's been drilled into them since the early days of the academy. So there's nothing to say that we can't develop that own observational mindset into our everyday lives too. So keep alert. Scan your surroundings, know where your exits and backup exits are. Take note of where more vulnerable members of the parish might be seated and see what you can do to offer them help in an emergency as well. There's really so much we can do to help if we all trained our eyes and ears to kind of look for those things that we can do to help. Be the helper in your parish and see what you can do to help. You know, the old standby is that 90% of the work in the parish is done by 10% of the people. And it bears true, but there's no reason to suggest that we can't shift that ratio a little bit and see what we can do to help more at our parishes.
And don't be afraid to call 911. You don't have to ask the pastor or usher if there's something right in front of you, you know, you empower yourself.
Absolutely, yes.
Because we see that around here as well.
Yeah, well, that's also helpful. Thank you so much, Dustin, for joining us today and just for walking us through all of those resources that you provide. I found those steps to be really helpful, just knowing the process that the parishes go through and their safety teams go through when they develop these things. So we just encourage our listeners, if this is something that you are passionate about or is really on your heart, you know, don't be afraid to seek out your pastor and, you know, see if you can be a part of helping your parish develop something like this or implement it. So thank you so much for your time, for all that you do for our diocese. And thank you for all of our listeners for taking the time to listen to today's topic and today's Illuminating Catholics podcast and for learning about Catholic Mutual and what they offer in our diocese. New episodes drop each Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts, the Diocese of Sioux City YouTube channel, or at lumenmedia.org.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Illuminating Catholics, shedding light to understand the modern church. Follow us for more episodes on topics of the Catholic faith. For more diocesan news, visit lumenmedia.org.